I knew the way my father would stand before I turned into the cul-de-sac. I'd been making this drive since I got my license at 16, and the house had accumulated its own grammar by now. The dogwood at the corner that had never grown past 8 feet. The Pattersons' basketball hoop with the torn net that nobody ever replaced. And then the split level at the end of the loop with its attached garage, and its retention pond out back that my father called a lake, and had called a lake for as long as I could remember. I pulled in behind Lucas's Audi and sat there for a moment with the engine off. Cindy got out first. She'd ridden with me because her Subaru was in the shop, and because I'd told her it was just a cookout, and because she had never seen the full version of my family, and I had let her believe the partial version was the whole one. She was standing in the driveway looking at the yard when my mother came out the front door, already wiping her hands on a dish towel the way she did whenever she heard a car, as if whatever she'd been doing inside was perpetually almost finished. "Celeste!" My mother said my name the way you say something you've been holding carefully. She hugged me, and when she pulled back, she looked at my face for just a beat too long, reading something there she wasn't going to name. The yard was full. Aunt Rosemary had driven in from Maryville with Uncle Phil, who hated the heat and was already installed in a lawn chair in the only sliver of shade. My cousin Derek was there with his girlfriend, Jess. I remembered halfway through the handshake. And there were a couple of my father's old colleagues from the distribution company, men in their 60s who wore polo shirts and shook hands the same way my father did, knuckles first, like they were settling something. Children ran on the grass in bare feet. The citronella candles on the folding tables hadn't been lit yet. The string lights were strung between the fence posts, but dark. It was that hour when everything is still possible. My father and Lucas were at the gas grill at the far end of the patio, and the sight of them together was so familiar it had become almost invisible. My father with his spatula and his ease, Lucas at his shoulder with a beer and that particular posture he got around our father open, leaning in, slightly performing the ease rather than inhabiting it. They both looked up when I crossed the yard. My father said, "There she is," the way he always did, warm and fond and faintly surprised, as if my existence at an event I had been invited to was a pleasant coincidence. Lucas gave me a one-armed hug. He smelled like expensive cologne and the heat. "Nadia's in the kitchen," he said. "She was looking for you." He said it like a gift, like he was managing the introduction, like I was the one who needed managing. I found Nadia by the punch bowl, and she was genuinely glad to see me. Nadia was always genuinely glad. It was one of her best qualities and also, I sometimes thought, a liability. She had been with Lucas for 2 years and had accepted, without ever being asked to examine it, the family's operating story. Lucas the one who was going places, Celeste the one who was careful, the one who kept her head down, the one who'd had some hard years and was still finding her footing. Nadia held my forearms when she greeted me and told me she loved my earrings. I thanked her and meant it. Cindy appeared at my elbow about 20 minutes in, when I was standing near the fence watching the pond and thinking about nothing in particular. "So," she said. She left the word alone. "It's fine," I said. "It's something," she said. Cindy was a textile conservator like me. She spent her days reading the history in fabric, the stress patterns in old silk, the way deterioration announced itself long before the visible damage appeared. She was good at it. The same quality made her an uncomfortable person to deceive. "I'll explain later," I said. She nodded and let it go and went to get another drink. By the time the food was laid, out the yard had settled into that particular rhythm of a summer gathering in its second hour. The ice in the cooler lower, the conversations looser, the children having gotten over the novelty of running and now draped over the adults in the indiscriminate way of children when they're tired. I ate and talked to Rosemary about her garden and listened to Phil explain at length a dispute he was having with his homeowners association, and all of it was fine. All of it was the surface. My father cleared his throat the way he did when he wanted an audience and already knew he had one. People turned. The conversations near the cooler tapered. Even the children went quiet in the distracted way of children who sense that something adult is about to happen. "Just want to take a minute," he said. He was holding his cup out in front of him, not quite a toast position, but close enough. It's a good thing having everyone together. Rosemary, you made the drive, that means something. Phil, I know August is not your season. Phil made a suffering man face. People laughed. Then my father looked at Lucas. There was a specific quality to how he looked at my brother. I had been watching it my whole life and had spent most of that time thinking it was simply love, which it was. But it was also something else, a recognition, a mirroring, the way you look at the version of a thing you always imagined. My father had built his hardware distribution company from a single delivery truck and a rented warehouse and 30 years of 7-day weeks. And he had done it without anyone's help. And he was proud of that in a way that was so structural to who he was that it didn't read as pride anymore, just as fact. And Lucas, with his Audi and his leased office space, and his commercial real estate territory, and his way of filling a room, Lucas was the vessel for everything my father wanted to believe he had passed down. My son has had a big year, he said. New territory, new clients. Lucas has put in the work and it's showing. He paused. There was warmth in what came next, genuine warmth, which was what made it land the way it did. Not everybody finds their stride at the same time. Celeste, you've always been the steady one, the planner. Some things take longer to build. He raised his cup. But this family gets there. People raise their cups. Lucas smiled. My mother looked at the ground. I set my drink down on the folding table. The thing about being described as careful, as steady, as still finding your footing, the thing nobody mentions is that it is a costume you are handed at such a young age that you forget you put it on. I had been the cautious one since I was 11 years old and had won a regional award for a science project, and my father had said, "Good for you," and then turned to ask Lucas about his soccer game. I had a master's degree, a job I was good at. A second job I had taken not out of desperation, but because I understood the difference between what I earned and what I needed, and I refused to pretend that gap didn't exist. I had made quiet decisions for 15 years that nobody in this yard had ever been asked to admire, because I had never needed to borrow anyone's admiration. That's an interesting way to describe it, I said. My voice came out at the same volume I used when I was talking to Cindy about lunch. Not raised, just present. My father looked at me. He was still in toast posture. He thought I was about to add to the sentiment. Finding my stride, I said. I find that interesting coming from someone whose stride I've been subsidizing for the last 4 years. The first place the yard went quiet was directly around me, a circle of silence that expanded outward like something dropped in water. Rosemary, 6 feet to my left, Derek and Jess by the food table. The 2 men from my father's old company, who had been mid-conversation about something involving a supplier, both stopping at the same moment. Lucas put down his beer. Celeste! He said my name the way you say someone's name when you want them to hear a warning in it. I'm not making a scene, I said. I'm adding information. You're embarrassing yourself. Am I? I reached into my bag. I had put the accordion folder there that morning, and I'd been aware of it all day the way you're aware of a weight that's been redistributed. Not heavy, just differently placed. I took it out and set it on the folding table next to the bowl of potato salad nobody had finished, and I opened it. The pages were in order. I had organized them the same way I organized condition reports at work, chronologically, with the supporting documentation clipped to each entry. Bank transfer records printed from my account. Text message screenshots printed 4 to page. One handwritten note on notebook paper that I had put in my desk drawer the morning after I received it because I had already known, even then, that knowing the difference between a loan and a favor was going to matter eventually. April 4 years ago, I said. $3,200. Lucas needed the gap covered on his security deposit for the Bearden apartment. I moved to the next page. The yard was completely still. I kept my voice at the same register, descriptive, sequential, a woman working through a document. September, same year, 2000. His car registration had lapsed and he was about to lose a client who required him to be on site. I moved again. The following March, 1100. He had a gap in his health coverage during a policy switch. Another page. October of the next year, 4000. I paused there the way you pause when a number requires a moment. That one was so that he could keep paying for the things he'd been telling Nadia he could afford. I did not look at Nadia when I said it. I didn't need to. I heard the specific quality of her silence change. When I looked up, she was standing 2 feet from Luca's, holding her cup with both hands, and she was looking at the pages on the table. Not at me. Not at Luca's. At the pages, the way you look at something when you are doing the kind of math that has no good answer, when you are running back through memory trying to locate the places where what you were told and what was true stopped matching up. Her face was very still. She did not move toward Luca's. She did not move away. She simply stood there in her yellow dress in the August heat, with her hands around her cup, and her eyes on the documentation of 4 years of a story she had been inside without knowing it. Luca's found his voice. He had the particular ability of men who had been charming their whole lives to locate a register of injury on short notice, the one that made them sound reasonable and you sound unhinged. "I have paid you back," he said. "You know I've paid you back." "Some of it," I said. 40% give or take over the full 4 years. "That's not," he stopped, started again. "You offered." "I did," I said. "The first time I offered. After that you asked." He looked at the yard, at the people in it. I watched him understand that the performance wasn't working, and I watched that understanding move through him, through his jaw, his shoulders, the set of his mouth, and become something that wasn't anger. It was smaller than anger. He'd always been smaller than he performed. I hadn't understood that until recently. "You want to talk about getting your life together," he said. His voice was quieter now, which was worse. "You want to stand there with your paperwork. Let's talk about the engagement, Celeste. Let's talk about the apartment on Magnolia you couldn't keep. Let's talk about the 1.5 years where you didn't have it together enough to." "You're right," I said. He stopped. "I had a hard few years," I said. "I lost the engagement, and I lost the apartment, and I lost about 18 months where I could see myself clearly. All of that is true." I picked up my drink from the table. "But I didn't finance those years on money I borrowed from you while telling everyone I was fine." The yard did not react immediately. It took a moment, the way a bell takes a moment to stop ringing. My father put down his spatula. He had been standing at the edge of the patio for the last several minutes in the posture of a man waiting for an opportunity to restore order, which was different from the posture of a man trying to understand what the disorder was about. He stepped forward. "All right," he said. "Celeste, this isn't." "Dad," I turned to face him fully, which I'd been avoiding because I'd known it would change something. "When did you know Luca's was stretched?" He looked at me. "Not the specifics. I'm not asking what he told you. I'm asking when you noticed the gap between what he said he was earning and what you could see he was spending." I kept my voice even. "Because you're good at math. You ran a business for 30 years, so I want to understand what you decided to do with what you noticed." My father's jaw moved. He was not a man who had been asked to account for himself very often, and the muscle memory for it was not there. "When he moved into that Bearden apartment," I said, "did you ask him how he was covering it? When he showed up in the Audi, did you ask about the payment?" I was not raising my voice. I was asking questions I had been holding for a long time, at the volume of someone sitting across a table from someone else. Or was it enough that it looked like the right answer? The yard was profoundly quiet. One of the children had climbed into Rosemary's lap, and she held it there with both arms, watching me with an expression I had no clean name for. My father looked at my mother. My mother looked at her hands. "I didn't know the specifics," my father said. There was something in his voice I hadn't heard before. Not quite defensiveness. Something closer to a man who had just noticed the shape of a room he'd been standing in a long time without looking at its walls. "I knew he was," I thought he was managing. "He was managing," I said. "He just wasn't telling you who was covering the parts he couldn't." Nadia set her cup on the table and walked toward the house. She did not say anything. She did not look at Luca's as she passed him. The screen door opened and closed behind her. Luca's watched the screen door. Then he looked at me. There was nothing left in his expression that resembled the person who had raised his beer bottle when I pulled in. He looked 33 years old and frightened, and I felt, unexpectedly, genuinely, something that was not satisfaction. Not even relief. Just the ordinary sadness of a thing that should have been said years ago, finally being said in the wrong season because there had been no right one. Cindy was at my left shoulder. I didn't know when she'd moved there. She was holding a fresh drink she wasn't drinking, standing close in the way that people stand close when they have finally understood several years of a friendship they only partially knew. The gathering ended without anyone announcing it. That was the thing about gatherings built on a shared story. Once the story develops a crack you can put your hand through, the gathering loses its reason for continuing. Rosemary said she had the drive back to Maryville. Phil was up from his chair before she finished the sentence. Derek and Jess said their goodbyes without making eye contact with Lucas, who stood near the edge of the patio looking at his phone with the determined concentration of a man who needed something to look at. He tried to stop Phil near the driveway, and they shook hands in the brief, conclusive way of men who don't have anything to offer each other in the moment, but are too polite to say so. He said something to Rosemary, and she hugged him and told him to take care of himself, and the hug and the words were both real and both beside the point. My father moved the folding chairs to the garage in 2 even trips, arms full, methodical, saying nothing. My mother collected the paper plates and took them to the kitchen, and I could hear the particular rhythm of her through the window, quick movements, slightly louder than necessary, the sound of a woman who handles disorder by keeping her hands occupied. Cindy found me in the kitchen and squeezed my arm. "I'm going to get a rideshare," she said. "I can drive you." "No," she said it gently but without negotiation. "You need to finish this." She picked up her bag from the hallway hook and was gone, and then the house was quiet in the way of houses after most of the people have left, the specific quiet of rooms that have been holding a lot and are now slowly releasing it. The screened-in porch faced the backyard. My mother came and stood in the kitchen doorway and said, "Come sit with us for a minute," and I followed her out. My father was already in his chair, the one that faced the yard, the one he had sat in for so many summers that the wicker had conformed slightly to the shape of him. My mother took the porch swing. I took the chair across from them, and for a while nobody said anything. The string lights were on, they came on automatically, on a timer, and they hung in their even rows over the empty yard, over the trampled grass and the bare folding tables, and the citronella candles burned all the way down. Past the fence, the pond was dark. A frog started up somewhere in the reeds, and then another, and then the dark was full of them. My mother spoke first because my mother always spoke first into a silence. She said she wished it had gone differently. She said she understood why I had done what I did. She said she wanted all of us to be okay. I listened. The words were real, and they were also what they had always been, her first reach for the weather of a moment, her instinct to stand between the lightning and the things it might damage. My father was quiet for a long time. He looked at the yard, at the string lights, at the dark shape of the pond beyond the fence. The frogs continued. The summer heat sat on the porch with us, thick and close, the same temperature as breath. "I let it be what I wanted it to be," he said. He said it at about half the volume of his toast, which was the right volume for it. With Lucas, what I saw, I wanted it to be a certain thing, and so I didn't ask the questions that would have told me it wasn't. My mother made a small sound beside him. Not words, just acknowledgement. "And I did the same with you." He looked at me then. There was no performance in it. He was 62 years old, and he was a man who had shaken hands at funerals and distributed hardware for 30 years and built a comfortable retirement on his own, and none of that had required him to understand the difference between seeing someone and simply not needing to manage them. He was finding out now what those things were not the same. "The way I talked about you, the steady one." I said it like I was proud, and he paused. His jaw worked. "I think I said it because it was easier than looking at what you'd actually done." I looked at him. He did not look away, which cost him something. I could see it cost him something. "I need you to stop telling that story," I said. "The one where Luca's got somewhere and I'm the one still finding her way." My voice was even, not cold, not forgiving, just plain, the way plain things sound when you've finally stopped decorating them. "I need it to stop with other people, and I need it to stop in the way you think about us. What I have built is real. The fact that it doesn't look like what you were watching for doesn't make it less real." My mother was crying quietly in the way she did everything, precisely, contained, her face very still, just the tears themselves moving. She didn't wipe them. She just let them go. My father nodded. It was a single nod, small and deliberate, the kind that comes from a man who has just put something down after a long carry and is not yet sure how to stand without it. We stayed on the porch a while longer. My mother made tea and brought it out, and none of us drank it. My father said a few more smaller things, partial sentences, the corners of thoughts he couldn't quite complete, and I let them stand without finishing them for him. I didn't need him to finish them. I needed him to have started. When I got up to leave, he walked me to the driveway. He stood there with his hands in his pockets the way he had always stood when watching something drive away, and I pulled out to the end of the cul-de-sac and raised my hand through the window. He raised one back. In the rearview mirror, I could see the string lights still on over the empty yard, bright and even in the dark, hung for a party that was finished. I turned onto the main road. I drove home through the warm August night with the windows down, past the Kroger and the light and the Patterson Street and the long, familiar stretch of interstate back into the city. And I thought about the folder in my bag and the way Nadia had stood holding her cup and the way my father had looked at me when he said, "I think I said it because it was easier." And I thought about the framing studio job I was going to go into tomorrow, and the museum work the day after, and the life I had been building steadily and without fanfare for 15 years, in the specific quiet of a woman who had confused her endurance with invisibility for long enough that correcting the record out loud, in front of everyone, had cost her something real. It had cost me something real. I drove home anyway.